Every morning, millions of dogs watch their owners walk out the door. The door closes, the house goes quiet, and then something happens inside that animal that most people never think about. Not because they don't care, because they assume they already know the answer. The assumption is this: the dog is sad for a few minutes. Maybe it whines, maybe it circles the room once or twice, and then it settles, it waits. Animals don't carry time the way we do, so the waiting isn't really waiting, it's just the absence of you. And the dog sits inside that absence until the door opens again and everything resets. That is not what happens. In 2015, researchers at Emory University placed dogs inside MRI scanners and measured their brain activity in response to different stimuli: the smell of their owner, the smell of a familiar human who wasn't their owner, the smell of a stranger. The results were not subtle. The caudate nucleus, the region of the brain most consistently associated with anticipation, reward, and emotional attachment, activated significantly more in response to the owner's scent than to any other stimulus. The same region, the same activation pattern seen in humans when they encounter someone they love. Not an approximation, not something that resembles it. The same thing. The dog's brain is not a simpler version of the human brain running a watered-down version of human emotion. It is a different brain running its own version of the same process. And the process, when researchers look directly at it, is more intense than most owners are prepared for. What happens in the body when you leave is measurable, and it begins before the door closes. Dogs read departure signals. The moment you pick up your keys, the moment you put on your shoes, the moment your behavior shifts toward the sequence the animal has memorized as leaving, cortisol begins to rise. Heart rate increases. The body is already responding to something that hasn't happened yet because the animal has learned to recognize the pattern with a precision that most humans underestimate. A 2019 study published in Scientific Reports monitored dogs using wearable heart rate sensors during owner departures and reunions. The cortisol spike at departure was significant, but the finding that surprised researchers was the reunion data. When owners returned after a long absence, the physiological response in the dog was measurably stronger than after a short one. The animal was not simply waiting in a neutral state. It was tracking time. Not the way a clock tracks time, but something functionally equivalent, an internal accumulation of absence that grew the longer the separation lasted. Think about what that means. The dog is not sitting in a quiet room, suspended, doing nothing. It is inside an experience that has a duration, that gets heavier, that the animal carries differently at hour 6 than it did at hour 1. Separation anxiety in dogs is not a behavioral problem. It is a neurological one. Research into canine brain structure has found that domestic dogs have a more developed limbic system relative to their wild ancestors than almost any other domesticated species. The limbic system governs emotion, memory, and attachment. Thousands of years of coevolution with humans did not simply make dogs more obedient. It made them more emotionally dependent, more capable of forming attachments that, neurologically, resemble the attachments humans form with each other. Oxytocin is part of the mechanism, the same hormone that bonds human mothers to their infants, that floods the brain during moments of deep social connection, releases in dogs during contact with their owners. A 2015 study in Science showed that when dogs and their owners made eye contact, both species showed elevated oxytocin levels. The dog looking at you and you looking back at the dog is, at a neurochemical level, a mutual bonding event. You are doing something to each other's brains simultaneously. And when you leave, the dog is not simply losing your presence. It is losing the primary source of a neurochemical it has become dependent on through thousands of years of shared evolution. The researchers who study this most carefully are deliberate about the language they use. They don't say the dog loves you the way a human loves you. The experience is different in ways that matter, and in ways that are genuinely difficult to map. But they also don't say the dog is fine. The data doesn't support that either. What the data shows is an animal with the neurological architecture for deep attachment running a physiological stress response at your departure, tracking your absence across time and releasing the same bonding hormone you release when it finally sees your face again. Every morning, millions of dogs watch their owners walk out the door. The door closes, the house goes quiet. What happens next is not nothing.